Whereas things are getting very heated in Washington, D.C., as a select group from Congress has been given access to the unredacted Epstein files, which reference our president far, far more than anyone could have imagined.
Well, he said that I spent time on Jeffrey Epstein's island. I didn't. I mean, he's a lightweight, this guy. He's a terrible, I think he's terrible. I thought he did a terrible job at the Grammys. I thought the whole...
This typical late-night start included a few lighthearted quips, a few easy audience giggles, and maybe a sly swipe at the day's headline. Nothing too weird or hazardous, just the typical routine. But that wasn't the case. When Jimmy Kimmel focused on Donald Trump directly, the mood shifted in a way that nobody could have predicted. All of a sudden, it sounded more like someone had touched a live wire than a speech. Something cracked due to the pressure, nor was it the sound apparatus. And the tension in the room brought everything together. Our unquestionably important and in a major story. A story that Donald Trump would like to just...
are a big deal, obviously, and a big story. A story that Donald Trump would prefer just goes away, but it won't just go away. It's salacious. It's the kind of story that makes headlines, and he knows that. So what he does is he bombards us with a dozen other crazy things to try to flood the...
Part of it is not watchable, but he was a lousy host. I'd say not as bad as Jimmy Kimmel, but pretty close. And no, he made a statement about me and Jeffrey Epstein's. I have nothing to...
What began as a typical comedy bit gradually transformed into something much more intense, and you could almost feel the temperature rising as the jokes kept landing. This was not a calm exchange of ideas or a thoughtful breakdown of policy points. It felt more like watching a carefully timed implosion. From the outside, everything still looked polished and controlled, but underneath, the structure was being quietly shaken, brick by brick, until you realized the foundation itself was under strain.
You know, it's a term you hear a lot, but rarely when it is literally true. And most of all, it is so bananas that the guy who's in charge of releasing all these files and redacting all this evidence is Donald Trump's own personal defense attorney. You know, when Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts of fraud, Todd Blanche was his lawyer. Now Todd Blanche is the gatekeeper to the Epstein file.
For a time, we're just getting started, so if you appreciate this breakdown and want to see more in-depth analyses like this, please click the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss what comes next. Now let's get back into it. For many years, Trump considered late-night hosts to be little more than background noise. It might be a bit bothersome, but it's not worth much attention. In the past, he has sparred with comedians, brushing off their jokes like dust on a well-tailored jacket. But there had a distinct atmosphere at this time. Kimmel didn't just make a few shallow jokes and move on. He examined the image. His ego was prodded. He questioned the more general storyline that has been connected to Trump for a long time. And that shift in approach changed everything. How does Trump respond to that? I'll describe how. By attacking Canada.
Is Trump responding to that? I'll tell you how. By attacking Canada again. He's at it again. This time, he's threatening to close down a new bridge they're almost finished with that connects Windsor to Detroit. He wrote, "As everyone knows, the country of Canada has treated the United States very unfairly for decades." I didn't know that, actually. They always seem pretty fair to me, but okay. Now, things are...
Trump hasn't exactly disregarded this issue as of yet. In all honesty, spectacle and exaggeration play a major role in late-night television. That's part of the formula. But this confrontation was intriguing for reasons other than its humor. The humor made that clear. The more Kimmel went into the absurd details, the more Trump appeared to be on the verge of overt irritation. We all know how easily annoyance can get out of control. Anger spreads. It multiplies. Furthermore, in today's media environment,
so much we can take in. So to distract us, right now one of the things he's doing is suing everybody. Now, last night, I mentioned Trump is suing the IRS that he runs for $10 billion, and that he's planning to negotiate a settlement to that suit with himself, which is just... If any other president did, it would be the biggest story of their whole 4 years in office. For Trump, it doesn't even crack the top 5 this month. But so the New York Times published a story yesterday, claimed Trump has dropped his demand that Harvard, the university, pony up $200 million.
The tone then shifted. Instead of mocking the obvious theatrics, Kimmel started highlighting the recurrence, the fixation with crowd sizes, the demand for loyalty, and the recycling of the same beliefs disguised as fresh rage. He portrayed it less as political analysis and more as an ongoing performance akin to a reality show that never really concludes its season. At that point, the tone became more...
The Spanish-speaking world to culture. Bad Bunny got a bad review from our bad president, unfortunately. He wrote, "The Super Bowl halftime show is absolutely terrible, one of the worst ever. It makes no sense, is an affront to the greatness of America, and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, or excellence. Nobody understands a word this guy is saying, and the dancing is disgusting, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the USA and around the world." This is a man who paid off a porn star.
The tone then shifted. Instead of mocking the obvious theatrics, Kimmel started highlighting the recurrence, the fixation with crowd sizes, the demand for loyalty, and the recycling of the same beliefs disguised as fresh rage. He portrayed it less as political analysis and more as an ongoing performance akin to a reality show that never really concludes its season. At that point, the tone became more intense since comedy is most effective when it discloses something that people are aware of but rarely say out. Instead of just reacting to storylines, Trump regularly reroutes them. Criticism turns into a stage, laughter becomes ammunition, and conflict into oxygen. Kimmel, though, took a different approach. He was unable to match volume to volume. He ridiculed the answers themselves. He sidestepped the policy debate and the opposing clamor. Instead, he sketched the pattern and let the audience figure it out. Ironically, this
Canada is building a massive bridge between Ontario and Michigan. President Barack Hussein Obama. Is that part of his apology for the Post the other day, or stupidly gave them a waiver so they could get around the Buy American Act? Now the Canadian government expects me as president to permit them to just take advantage of America. On top of everything else, Prime Minister Carney wants to make a deal with China, which will eat Canada alive. The first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada.
Things start to become intriguing at this point. Trump's toughness, strength, and reluctance to back down from criticism have long been the cornerstones of his public persona. But during this exchange, the optics felt different. Instead of being above the commotion, he seemed to be drawn into it. Rather of looming over late-night comics, he seemed entangled in their jokes. Additionally, the internet quickly became well-known. Videos become viral. There were responses from every angle. His followers rushed to his defense. Critics spread the jokes far more widely. What started out as a monologue developed into a critique of modern media strategies. In reality, who shapes the narrative? The politician with the loudhailer, or the comedian with the nightly crowd? Kimmel's ability to remain composed was what set it apart. He remained silent. Meanwhile, the criticism just served to intensify the spotlight. Ratings went up. Online engagement rose. The audience for the initial part grew with each fervent response. Rather than attempting to suppress it, Trump may have amplified it. At that point, the story changed from being funny to becoming a tactic.
All this other stuff going on. Busting into the election headquarters in Georgia, arresting journalists like Don Lemon, who is here with us tonight, suddenly shutting down the Kennedy Center for 2 years, calling for nationalized elections, Trump suing the government he runs for $10 billion. My head is spinning. I guess that's the point, but my God, remember when Trump was threatening to invade Greenland? That was not even too...
Instead of dismissing Kimmel as inconsequential, the responses exalted him. Instead than letting the incident fade away, the outcry locked it in the news cycle. It became a feedback loop. When Trump reacts to Kimmel's jokes, more gags follow. The audience may observe the cycle in real time. To be honest, political humor has always employed exaggeration to simplify complex facts into digestible portions. It amuses, teases, and challenges. But this dispute showed how tightly politics and entertainment are intertwined, now entwined. The lines are almost entirely hazy. When a former president reacts to a monologue that ignites a national conversation like a rival on a reality show, You're witnessing performance after performance. The optics of the reaction and the content of the jokes made this event very painful. For someone who portrays himself as unshakable, a significant public response to a late-night broadcast can seem like a weakness. Seldom is shouting necessary for true confidence. As the reactions heated up, the viewpoint shifted. In politics, perception can be just as significant as reality. This typical late-night start included a few light-hearted quips, a few easy audience giggles.
With his own face on a magazine, she spanked him. He's offended by the halftime. This is a guy who's okay with this being the release of the Epstein files. He's offended for the children. The MAGAverse was so hopping mad about Bad Bunny. It really is amazing how differently people can see the same thing. Half of us saw a heartwarming story of immigrants who had dreams to come to America, work hard, get married, grow up, raise families, sing, dance.
Dance and sing. Viewers began asking increasingly intricate questions. If a humorous piece can provoke this kind of escalation, what does it tell us about the current state of politics and the fragility of public narratives? The discussion evolved into a metaphor for something bigger. In today's environment, attention is valuable, and the individual who receives it gains momentum. It was not necessary for Kimmel to win a discussion. He only needed to make a moment. The reactions carried out the hard task. Trump must make a difficult choice. Reacting to the section could make it worse, while ignoring it could make you appear powerless in the face of mockery. What made it so captivating was the tension in the situation, which was a no-win situation disguised as a social media altercation. It is possible for politicians to underestimate that dynamic. Whether the emotions were appropriate or the jokes were hilarious didn't matter in the end. The deeper question was what this suggests about public discourse. When satire motivates strategy and outrage drives ratings, the line between entertainment and governance becomes nearly invisible to 200 million people.
200 million, now he wants $1 billion. Every post now is a ransom note from the president. And as far as Harvard goes, come on, guys, you know how this works. There's an easy way out of this. Just give him an imaginary degree of some kind. Give him an award for his magnificent brain and penis, and this all goes away. Give him, you want to know what to do? I'll tell you what to do. Give him the first annual Donald J. Trump Penis Brain Prize.
However, decibels are not used to assess impact in the field of optics. It has to do with the interpretation of the response. At this point, perception was crucial. Once the first dust settled, the conversation shifted from humor to control. Who can really sense how fast modern politics are moving? The politician at a campaign rally or the host at a desk with a camera in perfect sync. Kimmel refrained from seeking controversy. The conversation revolved around him. In today's media environment, for spectacle is just as powerful as silence. Furthermore, Trump has a track record of valuing spectacle, bright posts, audacious claims, and prompt reprisals. He has galvanized supporters and remained in the center of the storm thanks to this tactic. But this situation felt different. Kimmel didn't pose as a competitor. He portrayed himself as an observer noting behavior. It's critical to acknowledge that minor distinction. Arguing feels competitive. Describing someone's reaction while letting the audience laugh seems like exposing. Canada. Things start to become intriguing at this point. Trump's toughness, strength, and reluctance to back down from criticism.
All of this, I believe, every bit of this is an effort to distract us from the fact that Trump's name, according to one of the congressmen who just reviewed the unredacted files, Jamie Raskin, says he did a search. He said Donald Trump's name appears more than 1 million times, which is a lot of. There's only 3 million pages in the whole. That's more than Harry Potter gets mentioned in all 7 Harry.
And being exposed can be painful. The more Trump resisted, the more the notion that the reactions were expected was reinforced. Being furious seemed normal. A well-known loop is triggered by every perceived slight. Finding a trend replaced concentrating on a single discourse. People noticed how quickly things got out of control, how quickly posts emerged, and how quickly the focus shifted from a more broad approach to a personal grievance. Regardless of one's political stance, the reaction cycle's periodicity was apparent. The episode expanded the discussion of culture beyond late-night television. The more attention it received, the more obvious one reality became. Politics and entertainment are closely related. A joke has the ability to initiate a news cycle. Reactions may dominate headlines. It's become harder to tell the difference between governing and performing. Trump is perhaps more conscious of this overlap than most. His technique has included showmanship, the stunning entrances, memorable slogans, and boisterous rallies. One, he requests attention.
Donald Trump didn't watch the Kid Rock halftime show. He watched Bad Bunny. He wanted to make sure he hated him as much as he thought he would, and he did. Someone shot this video of Trump watching the game at his hotel in Palm Beach, and you can see that's the monitor. He's got a bunch of people there, and he's joined at his table by none other than, you'll see here, Senator Lindsey Graham. That is what I wish on Donald Trump. An eternity of watching football halftime shows with Lindsey Graham.
Instead than going into policy specifics, Kimmel concentrated on behavior, repetition, intensity, and a constant war attitude. It felt more like a psychological critique than an intellectual struggle. When satire appears authentic, audiences respond. Satire is intended to undermine individuals in positions of power, according to critics, while supporters claim the monologue was harsh or offensive, escalating tensions. The argument's scope expanded. What role should comedy have in politics? And where does ridicule start and criticism stop? Is a strong response a sign of resilience, or does it strengthen the original joke? At this time, the story took a new turn. Trump versus Kimmel was no longer the only issue. It became a conversation on how well-known individuals handle pressure. Trump rarely ignores criticism. Such disobedience is viewed by supporters as a show of strength and a refusal to bow to media elites. Persistent counterpunching, however, is risky. When every jab is met with maximum force, the intensity may become blurry and seem more reactionary than strategic. In this case, the impression gained traction. Kimmel remained calm throughout the follow-up segments. The distinction improved everything. There was amusement on...
We're living in dog years now, and it's only going to get nuttier now that this new batch of Epstein files is out. The Distractomatic is cranked all the way up. The DOJ released 3 million pages on Friday, which sounds like a lot until you realize there is another 3 million pages that they haven't released and do not plan to ever release, even though they are required to release all of it by law. And it's important to remember, the Justice Department is a completely independent agency from the White House when anyone other than Donald Trump is president. Trump put Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche in charge of the DOJ, which is kind of like the IRS hiring your mom and dad to do your tax return.
But one recurrent truth stands out. When politics and comedy clash, perception usually wins out over substance. Kimmel did not have to win a debate or present a comprehensive policy argument. He only needed to create a moment powerful enough to provoke a response. After receiving that response, the plot unfolded pretty organically. Trump may or may not have lost control, depending on your perspective. Pushing back was seen by some as a sign of strength, when escalation is viewed as vulnerable by others. This discussion undoubtedly showed how delicate the balance of, during a limited period of spectacular headlines and trending hashtags, media repercussions occur. It appeared like the dynamics were inverted. The comedian in the spotlight seemed to set the tempo, and the politician responded. The punchline seemed to take over the stage at that point, and the response became the story.